Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live panel discussion on neurodiversity in the workplace. I'm just going to check to see if it's working on LinkedIn Live, which I hope it is. We will have to see in just a few moments. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion in celebration of Neurodiversity Month. Firstly, a big thank you to our sponsors, US Tech Solutions, for their generous support in making this event possible. And if anyone would like to learn more about US Tech Solutions and the work that they're doing to empower their customers to embrace diversity as a strategic advantage, you can reach out to Sarabi Bansal on LinkedIn. Let me just share Sarabi's URL in the chat. Sarabi is with us. She's in the audience watching on as we have today's discussion. But before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to outline how today's session is going to work. So we won't be taking live calls. I think it could get pretty hectic if we do. So we're just going to encourage you to submit your questions throughout the discussion using the chat feature on the platform today, and we'll address those questions at the end. And if we have too many questions, I will take note of those questions, ask our panelists separately, and then share those with you via email or on social media. So you will get the answers to your questions, have no fear. So for today, the agenda, as you'll see at the top of the chat, is as follows. To begin with, we're going to discuss the barriers to neurodivergent people, so exploring the challenges faced by individuals with neurodiverse conditions in the workplace. Then we'll discuss the challenges that organisations are having, so the hurdles that they face when hiring and supporting a neurodiverse workforce. And then we'll start to look at how we move the dial, looking at ways to move the needle forward and create a more inclusive work environment for everyone. And lastly, as I said, we'll open up for Q&A where we'll get to answer your questions. So joining me today to guide us through this conversation are three incredible experts who I've pulled together with the help of US Tech Solutions. To begin with, we have Kelly Castro, wave Kelly, founder of Carson's Cookie Dough, a company with a mission to support differently abled individuals while providing a delicious product. We also have with us Nick Bruno, who is VP of People and Culture at Aspiritech, a company powered by a team comprised of over 90% neurodivergent individuals. We also have with us Audra Woods, DEI Client Executive at Allegis Global Solutions, who helps companies to achieve their diversity, equity and inclusion goals. So thank you, guest speakers, for joining me today. I'm really excited to hear their insights and perspectives as we move throughout this discussion. And for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Erica Bertels. I'm your host for today. I'm the interim CEO of the UWI, and our mission is to help organisations move the dial on their workforce and workplace initiatives. So welcome, everyone. It's great to see you. Before we get into the discussion piece of today, I did just want to set the scene a little bit as to why we're having this conversation. So neurodiversity, for those of you who are perhaps new to this topic, refers to the natural variation in the human brain function, and it encompasses conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and many more. Estimates suggest that around 15 to 20% of the world's population is neurodivergent. And this means that a significant portion of the workforce has a brain that functions differently to what might be classed as neurotypical. Unfortunately, however, the unemployment rate for this group is significantly higher than the average. So studies show that people with autism are unemployed at a rate of 85%, and people with ADHD have an unemployment rate of about 30%. So for organisations, what this means is that by not embracing neurodiversity and looking at ways to incorporate and support more neurodivergent talent into its business, they're missing out on talented and an untapped pool of individuals who can bring innovation and diverse thought into their organisation and into their teams. So today's discussion really aims to explore the gap that exists and how we can start to bridge that gap. So, panelists, we're going to move into the first section of today's discussion, which is looking at the barriers to neurodivergent people. So, Kelly, I wondered if I could start with you, because I wondered if you might share with us the experience that you had as a mother to neurodivergent children, and then, the concerns that you had that then led you to forming the Carson's cookie dough business.
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. So I have 3 sons, 2 of whom are on the autism spectrum. One of my sons, his autism is like a superpower. So he has photographic memory. Academics are a breeze for him. He enjoys school. He enjoys learning. His challenge is socializing with peers. So consistently, his most challenging subject since kindergarten has been lunch. And lunch is always difficult for him, still is. He's in middle school now, and parties are very difficult for him. But otherwise, we really look at his autism, so to say, as a superpower. And then my younger son, he has significant challenges. I mean, he goes to a specialized school. He has a one-to-one aide. His autism impacts his communication, his learning, his behavior, and it's definitely, he has a lot more barriers to overcome than our older son. Both work extremely hard and have been working extremely hard since they were toddlers. They are both still in school, and they have both given us a front row seat to the barriers, that they face. Since they are still in school, they both have access to IEPs, and the school provides them with accommodations to help overcome these barriers to help them succeed, which is great. Through them, we've met parents of older children who are neurodiverse, and we've heard of some of their challenges. One such parent is a friend of ours, and she was telling me about her teenager who went to school at a place that helped with job training. During his first week, he was overwhelmed, as anyone would be when starting a new school, and he put his head down, and his aide said, "Sit up." And he said, "I need a minute. I need to calm down." And I was taught to put my head down. I become overwhelmed as a safe way to self-regulate. And his aide told him, "You can't do that in the working world," and made him sit up. He wouldn't let my friend's son do this very benign action to help bring him back to neutral. And in that moment, as my friend was telling me the story, I knew I wanted to create a company that allowed employees to put their head down, so to say, to do what they need to do to succeed. Going down that road, that opened up communication with more adults, opened up my eyes to what's down the road, what's waiting for these individuals when they get through school at age usually 21 or 22. And it was startling to see. I mean, I'm still in the elementary, middle school phase, so I hadn't really thought about it that much. But being forced to take a look at that, it was startling. There's not much waiting. I have been told that these individuals have difficulty finding employment, and even more difficult time finding meaningful, sufficient employment with adequate hours. A lot of time it's repetitive menial tasks or only a few hours a week. And this leaves them without much mental stimulation and without much social interaction. So they're put at a large risk of regression, which is a scary thing because these individuals, I see it in my kids, my 7-year-old even, just they work extremely hard at school and their therapies. Many go to school 11 months out of the year, additional therapies when they're not in school. So seeing and then coming out of that with nothing really waiting for them and no, real opportunities available, it's nerve-wracking to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is kind of scary that there is that cliff, as you say, when they get to, they've been through school, that support kind of stops, and then, they're left with very limited options. Nick, Kelly kind of briefly touched on some of those challenges that neurodivergent individuals might have, such as, social interactions, feelings of, overwhelm. What other kind of barriers do you see, either, for neurodivergent people or that are kind of more process barriers that means that they struggle to find employment and stay in employment?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the struggles come from when you just look at what is the personality profile of someone who is neurotypical compared to what's the personality profile of someone who is neurodivergent. If you just take, you any random personality traits that you want out of a hat, be it like things that are memory, executive function, social skills, creativity, problem solving, physical activity, interest in hobbies, special interests, things like that. Someone who is neurotypical, those areas in their personality are all going to be pretty close together. Your problem solving skills, your interest in hobbies, your memory, they're all going to be kind of pretty close to what the norm is. Obviously, even if someone is neurotypical, they can be super good at one thing and not so great at another. But when you take someone who is neurodivergent and you look at that kind of personality profile, those soft skills, those hard skills, you're going to see a very, very spiky profile when you compare it to somebody else. You can be, if you're just thinking of things kind of stereotypically, kind of much lower in executive function, much higher in problem solving and interest in hobbies, lower in social skills, much higher in creativity. And that is kind of what sort of naturally creates this barrier when it comes to difficulties with finding employment, maintaining employment, in some kind of meaningful capacity. Because when you take someone who has a more spiky profile like that and put them with a group of people that aren't really educated on how to support individuals like that, they are going to struggle. And then you're going to get things with people struggling just because the education on how to support someone like that isn't there. So that's what I really believe causes those barriers in the workplace. And that's really what we see when we get people who come into our organization and we talk to them about their past experiences. It's really, I had this job and my manager didn't know what to do when I needed to, take a timeout and collect myself. I didn't have clear, specific instructions on how to do what I needed to do. I had instructions that maybe they thought made sense or were intuitive because it was intuitive to them. You know, really, really easy example of that. Say your expectation for your supervisors is to schedule one-on-one meetings with their team members. I give you that instruction for what you're supposed to do. I would imagine most people listening here right now think, oh, that's great, that's crystal clear. But from someone who is neurodivergent, that cannot be specific enough. What's the timing of these meetings? What are these meetings supposed to cover? How are you tracking them? Who's supposed to be scheduling these meetings? I don't want to say that you have to over detail things, but you need to take the care and attention to make sure you are giving clear and specific instructions as if, someone is starting from zero, not clear, specific instructions to make sure you understand it. Instructions to make sure anybody, regardless of how they process information, is going to understand things. And really, it just takes some time and care and attention to be able to do that. And I think that's where a lot of the barriers come from.
Yeah, and I kind of take your point in the sense that, this is an individual case by case kind of basis in terms of how a manager would work with a neurodivergent person, or even just, any person within their team, to really understand what will help them to kind of maximize their own potential at work. And Audra, from kind of your background in the contingent space, in kind of contract work, do you think that there are kind of different barriers for neurodivergent people in the contingent space that might be slightly different to full-time permanent employment?
Oh, yes, for sure. And first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. And Kelly and Nick, I'm really glad to be on the panel here with you. But there definitely are a lot of barriers when it comes to the contingent workforce. It can be challenging because you have multiple parties involved. You have the end client, the MSP, and I'm with AGS, and the supplier. And everyone is at different journeys on how to support the community. So it's very key that everyone is aligned. So some challenges, especially within the interview process, individuals may be more reluctant, right, to self-disclose prior to the interview out of fear that they may be discriminated against or not get the role. And it's a huge lack of education from employers just across the board. I mean, Harvard Business Review reported that neurodivergent professionals in some roles, they can be 30% more productive. So I feel that it's just like a lack of sight of the value that they can bring to the organization. So it's very important to just make sure that you have the investment or preparation for the accommodations. And suppliers may not be educated on how to accommodate these communities. So just the best way I would say is to educate. That's so key in ensuring that from a recruiting standpoint, that you're creating that psychological safety environment. Because it's people. It's more than just a number. It's more than just a submittal or revenue. It's a person's life that you're changing. So it's important that you partner and really have that education and understanding, and not being judgmental. If someone has like lack of eye contact or different social norms, that's okay. So that's some of the ways to overcome some of the barriers that we see within the contingent space.
Yeah, that's great, because I think sometimes we tend to think a lot about just kind of traditional full-time permanent employment, but actually there's loads of different types of employment. And I think sometimes we forget that those kind of more flexible arrangements are a great opportunity for neurodivergent talent, but then sometimes this process of, you know, the system that they have to go through to get to that point is a barrier in itself. So thank you for kind of bringing that up. I think it's a great discussion for us to continue to be having in this space. So when it comes to employers, let's look at the barriers that, or even the challenges or the roadblocks that employers come up to in this process. Nick, Aspiritech is obviously, known for having a high percentage of neurodivergent individuals. What is your experience of the challenges that an employer faces from their side of it when it comes to hiring and supporting neurodivergent talent?
I really think the primary challenge ties into the education piece. It's actually kind of funny. I was just on an advisory call with a consultant today who reached out to me about, supporting neurodivergent talent with their client. And the client was all about, how can we attract this neurodivergent talent? Apologies for the dogs barking in the background if you can hear that. But how do they attract this neurodiverse talent for them to drive innovation? And I have to tell them, time out. You are on like step 17. We have to start at step 1 here. And step 1 is understanding that your teams are already neurodiverse. With 15 to 20% estimated to be neurodiverse, you have a neurodiverse team already, whether it is people who are openly neurodiverse, whether it's people who even know they are neurodiverse or not. You have people in your workplace who are doing these jobs who are being successful. When you look at your turnover, your retention rates, I think you will oftentimes find that the employees that you are not retaining, that a higher percentage of them are neurodiverse adults. And that is because your workplace doesn't have these support systems in place to be neuro-inclusive. So really the challenge faced by employers is not understanding that their teams are already neurodiverse and having this gap in knowledge of what it means to be a neuro-inclusive workplace, which is not hard. It's a very easy thing to do, but it takes some time. It takes some effort. It doesn't take money. And I think a lot of times you see these larger organizations just want to throw money at what they think is a problem and get some great end result from it. instead of looking at it from a perspective of what kind of organizational cultural changes do we need to put in place to support this workforce and ultimately benefit from this workforce as an employer, before you think about just, I want to bring these people in. First thing that you have to solve is how you are supporting people in your workplace. And once you do that, I think you can really make a concentrated effort on attracting other neurodiverse talent that you don't already have at your organization.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, I think all of that is really interesting. And Audra, I'm just thinking, in the market at the moment, when we look at kind of the staffing market more specifically, and the organizations that are looking to get, bring neurodivergent talent into their workforce, why is that? Are there kind of, have you seen anything that might indicate, a trend or why neurodiversity is such a big topic for them?
Yes, great question. I would definitely say it's because the awareness and the visibility that we have now on the community, and also, like I mentioned before, the value that these individuals can bring. And a lot more people are more open to disclosing that they are neurodivergent, and a lot more employers are open to accepting and providing those accommodations. And I want to highlight how it's very important with employers to just make sure that you have the intent is tied to the outcome, right? And what I mean by that is, if you want to recruit this talent, just make sure that you have a strong foundation in which you've made investments in to support this talent coming into your organization, because like I mentioned, there's a lot of true value there.
Yeah, and I think, what resonates from both what you and Nick have said is that, it's this, don't go into it just looking to recruit the talent, like to have that foundation and that reason behind it. There kind of has to be a reason why, neurodivergent talent is so suited to, a problem that your organization is currently having that it wants to solve. And Audra, sorry, just to tack onto that, are they hindering success with kind of whether it's neurodiversity or diversity programs for a lot of these people?
Yeah, candidly, I think that what's hindering it is that a lot of organizations feel that it's a project or feel that it's a fad, and you truly have to ensure that it's embedded within your organization, and for it to be sustainable, right? At all factors, at all levels within the business, you want to ensure that DEI is incorporated to where it's just a standard, right? It's not a must to have. A nice to have, is a must have. And you want to ensure that just throughout the organization, you're checking progress and not boxes. So that's probably the biggest thing that I see across the board, is just to make sure that leadership is bought in fully at all levels, where the employees can truly feel the impact.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really valuable insight for a lot of organizations, whether it's contingent or even just for the workforce in general. And Kelly, with Carson's Cookie Dough, obviously your mission is to support differently abled kids and adults, while running a good business and providing a good product. But are there any kind of things that you've faced in your journey that you think organizations could learn from, in terms of, the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome?
I think Nick and Audra explained it great. I mean, the investment has to be tied into the outcome. These employees add so much value to a business. And, as Nick said, time and effort does have to be put in. I mean, I know for my sons, they say, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. The neurodivergent, and Nick, you touched on this as well, it's very specific to the individual. And it's not something that can be easily anticipated. And there's no wide cast net. I mean, there's, accommodations that could be made for more neurotypical, like a left-handed person. And if you think back to high school, they could be given a left-handed desk. And now they're able to do their work much more reasonably. and without that barrier of leaning over awkwardly. If someone's in a wheelchair, they can get a ramp to get inside a door, to get upstairs. And for these individuals who are neurodivergent, it's definitely a matter of getting to know the individual, of becoming more accepting that maybe, as Audra touched on, they may not be looking you in the eyes, or maybe like my friend's son, he needs to put his head down. Things that may seem out of the ordinary to you and I, something we would not need to do. That's something that some of these individuals do need to do. So it's just kind of finding out what individuals need and finding a reasonable and manageable way to implement that accommodation. My kids are in school, they have an IEP, and I just had my son's IEP meeting the other day, and it's a meeting of the minds to say, here's this person's strengths, here's this person's challenges, and what can we do to get, to enable this person to do the best work that they can do. And, as both of the other panelists touch on, the value is there. The investment is worth it, and it doesn't cost much money. It costs mostly time and effort, but it's well worth the investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And just quickly for our audience, don't forget to add any questions that you might have into the chat as well, so that we can address those at the end. But Kelly, sorry, just one more thing. I just wondered if how anxiety or kind of fear or uncertainty also kind of plays a role in this. I imagine that for management, there's an anxiety about having to manage people who perhaps behave differently. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I have anxiety about helping my own children, and I live with them. I see them 24/7. So it's an overwhelming thought if you think of how am I going to do this for every single person? And, it's because it is something that doesn't come naturally to us. However, it's an interesting thought because for the neurodivergent individuals, that's how they face the whole world every day. So I think meeting in the middle is a great approach. And and then the good news is there's so many professionals out there who are willing and very able to help. I'm talking about not only just the job coaches and all these organizations that help with job placement, but even therapists and teachers from their school. These individuals are so passionate about their students, and they know the value that these individuals can bring to anything that they do. So I've been blown away by just the offers of help, the actual help, and just the assistance I've been given by therapists who have worked with my children, therapists who I've never met before. And, these are school therapists. These are guys who help like kindergartners and, grade school kids and high school kids. And they say, oh, I want to get to your kitchen. I want to help in any way I can. And it's just these teachers, it's a calling for them, and they really love their students and they want to see them succeed even beyond the classroom. So, they're a great resource. They've been a wonderful resource to me. So I think that there is help out there, and very capable help. So that kind of helps ease my anxiety, personally.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really interesting point. In education and kind of within society up to a certain age range, that there is support out there, and there's plenty of support. And actually, maybe it's just bringing that into the workplace to then provide additional support there. Nick, I just wonder, with new generations coming up, we've seen a lot about kind of younger generations seeing more diagnosis. Is that kind of presenting a challenge and for organizations, in that these newer generations coming up are perhaps more self-aware about their diagnosis, and that, that then might affect the way in which, how many new recruits they get through the doors? What are your perspectives on kind of neurodiversity in these newer generations of work coming up?
I don't think that presents a problem at all. I think that presents a tremendous opportunity for organizations. And I really think that is what is helping to make neurodiversity such a huge topic right now in the workplace. Is, this new generation of people who are so open to mental health and everything that goes with and goes around that. I think you're seeing a new generation of people, and we see it a lot in our internship program, who come through the door and say, I am autistic, this is what works for me. And there's no shame, there's no beating around the bush about it, there's no hiding. And I think people are doing themselves a lot of favors when they are already in that mindset at such a young age, where they come in and say, this is who I am, this is how I work most efficiently, this is how you can support me.
Great stuff. No, I thought I'd throw that in there because it's a topic that I've been discussing a lot with Ian, the chairman of the UWI, about, the generational differences and, these new waves of workers coming through into the workforce. But now I want to start talking about these solutions or ways forward, or, things to move the dial, which is absolutely my new favorite phrase. So Kelly, from the experience that you've had in building this environment that supports differently abled people with different, diverse needs and working styles, what do you think has been one of the biggest learning lessons that organizations can kind of take from your journey?
I think that it's learning the value, that conversations like this do wonders. Learning that the investment is worth it. It doesn't take much, and it's not such an overwhelming job to do to get from A to B. I think, what I like to focus on in building our company is kind of what I see, what I like, and what I don't like. I know what's out there right now can be challenging in that, I know I've heard stories about an individual going to a job and sweeping a floor for 5 hours a week, and that terrified me. But I also know I'm building a business where these menial jobs are a requirement. They are necessary to run a business. So we put a lot of thought. I worked with many of the teachers and the aides I spoke about to make sure when someone comes to work, we're providing a quality product, and to make sure they're getting stimulation, they're getting socialization. So we kind of created like a station. If you remember gym class from your youth, you do the circuits like jump rope and then hopscotch. So, when you come in, and we have different stations. So someone could be measuring ingredients, someone could be mixing ingredients, rolling the dough and packaging, getting the packaging ready, washing the dishes. And then they move throughout the circuits to make sure, they're not doing the same thing over and over again. They're engaged, they're learning different skills, they're building on skills that they already have. And as Nick touched on, at each station, there's, a specific outline of what needs to be done. What does this job look like, and what goes into doing that, just to make sure we're setting everyone up for success and make sure everyone feels confident in what they need to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Kelly, because I think, they're different environments, but I think that the sentiment is the same as you've said. Nick mentioned earlier, providing that clear instruction, and kind of giving everyone the opportunity to maybe even just find a bit of variety in the job that they do. And I think, I heard something brilliant a couple of months ago, and it was operating in your zone of genius. And it was saying that everyone's kind of good at stuff, everyone's kind of bad at, that everyone has stuff that they're not quite good at. And then you have these zones of genius. And so, being able to help someone, really sit and bask in that zone of genius and bring their best self and maximize their potential at work is also, it's a great sentiment. And Nick, when we go back to kind of the organizations and what they can be doing, we've spoken previously about feedback loops, and also kind of building neurodiverse friendly recruitment processes and hiring processes. But is there one thing that organizations can be doing to have the biggest impact on kind of their neurodivergent population?
There is, and I think the answer will be a little surprising. The thing that'll have the biggest impact on your neurodiverse population is to be kind. That's really, really what it comes down to at at the end of the day is that you are leading with kindness, and that is going to give you the biggest return on investment there. Outside of just leading with kindness, you do need the education. You do need to know what accommodations look like, what support looks like. But when you start educating yourself and learning about these things, you'll realize that they all kind of tie back into just being good to people, being kind, and that is what really is going to give you the best and absolutely most success there, whether you are thinking about recruitment and retention of your neurodiverse staff, if you're thinking about managing, managing down, managing up, regardless of what you are thinking about it, as long as you have that underline of kindness that you are going into it with, you are going to be super, super, super successful there. And, if you're looking for something that is more granular, like how do I, have a neuro-inclusive recruitment process? How do I have a neuro-inclusive management process? I think my sales team would be mad at me if I didn't say, we have a neurogrowth platform on our website where we teach these things to organizations with self-paced training, and it's very, very cheap. I should say, if you want to get more granular into it, but kindness, if you have to take anything away from here and go, how am I going to be more neuro-inclusive? That's what I would want you to think.
And also, from the conversations that we've had, it's not just neurodivergent individuals that benefit from this, right?
That is absolutely true. With our recruitment process is pretty unique, just super high level. And I guess the most out of the box thing about it is if I'm interviewing an individual, they have all the interview questions in advance before we have even spoken to each other, because I want somebody at their most prepared best self when I am talking to them. I am not hiring a litigating attorney. You don't have to have the ability for me to throw questions at you and for you to give me an amazing answer. I want you to prepare yourself, to research, to be as educated and prepared as you possibly can be when I am talking to you. And I think that really just comes down to making a safe, secure, kind interview process. And funnily enough, when I'm interviewing people, the most outspoken feedback I get from individuals on our recruitment process is people who identify as neurotypical, who go, oh, this was the best interview I've ever had. I wish more companies did this, etc. So, when you're putting these neuro-inclusive practices into place, you are just making yourself a good employer in general, not just a good employer to your neurodiverse team members.
Absolutely. Yeah, I thought we should kind of hit that one home there, Nick. So, Audra, a lot of the first things that larger organizations think about is ERGs or BRGs, whichever way they'd like to frame that. And I know that AGS also runs its own kind of ERGs internally. But for you, how important do you think ERGs are in terms of building a supportive work culture for everybody, including neurodivergent talent?
That's a great question. And Nick, I've like, you just got me fired up hearing how you speak to everything. So thank you so much. When it comes to ERGs, it's so key to have that true sense of community. But I want to highlight how it's important that the organization supports the ERGs and supports the community, right? And providing the ERGs, providing the education and awareness and the advocacy and the representation. Our ERG at AGS enable, they're amazing. I've learned so much from them. They've created such a great sense of community. They have are constantly, anytime Microsoft has like any accommodation updates or anything like that, they always make sure that they educate as well. I also think it's important for organizations that do not have ERGs, especially tied to this community, is really, really key. And I do want to share the reason why from my personal experience. Very early in my recruiting career, I was not at AGS. I want to be very clear here. I was recruiting a candidate and they expressed to me that they needed an accommodation. And so I expressed to my leadership as far as how to get the accommodation. And I got a lot of pushback. I got a lot of pushback on why I submitted the candidate, because the candidate actually got an interview and we had to have accommodations. And that's something that stuck with me in my career, because if we would have had an ERG that was providing the education and that awareness, and for us to visibly see how valuable that community is to the work environment, maybe I would not have gotten so much pushback on why I submitted the candidate. So I wanted to share just from my personal experience, because that's something that stuck with me throughout my career. And it's a prime example of why ERGs are so important to have within the organization.
Thank you for sharing that, Audra. And I think that's all very interesting to hear. But for an organization that is kind of starting this process of they want to build a diversity or neurodiversity program, what would you say are kind of the first steps for them in terms of getting the talent through the door?
Yeah, from getting the talent, I'm actually going to go back to the education. I know I always go back to that, but making sure that you're even looking at properly organizations that truly are about the mission at hand, right? And what I mean by that is there are a lot of organizations that are not really about supporting the community or those individuals. So as you are looking and evaluating partnerships to source that talent, just it's key that you are looking for organizations that are tied to the mission as well as your organizational goals as well. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think those in that industry, the partnerships are really key in terms of getting the right talent and the top talent through the door,
Mhm.
and then diverse talent also comes through that. Kelly, I just wondered if there was anything else from your experience that perhaps could demonstrate the things that organizations can do that are really simple. I know that we spoke about kind of signage and the communication piece, but was there anything else that you think could be brought to their attention?
I mean, I think Nick and Audra really touched on a lot of the highlights with the education. And Nick, I loved what you said with leading with kindness, and how it impacts the neurotypical. All employees benefit from it. I couldn't agree more. I think it's really learning the individual and finding out what they need to succeed, and seeing a manageable and reasonable way to provide that. And yeah, I mean, maybe the common thread that runs through neurodiverse challenges is the communication piece. So I think if I had any one area to focus on, it would be the communication and just different ways to get what needs to be done across. And that may be, with pictures, video, actually spelling the words out, just different people learn different ways and different things sink in different ways. Some learn from watching the video, some just need a little icon, and then some really need it spelled out. So I think that just sets them up for success. And that's really the bottom line, what you want to do. We want everyone to succeed. It benefits everybody. But no, I really enjoyed, I love what you said with the kindness and Audra with the education. I think those two encompass the main highlights of what needs to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly. And I think that's the discussion pieces over. And so I'm going to open up to Q&A. So for our audience, if you do have questions, then pop them into the chat. I see we've got a couple already. So let me take stock of what we have here. Sarabi, we have some questions here. So what types of accommodations can be offered to support neurodivergent individuals in the workplace, such as flexible working arrangements, noise cancelling headphones, specialized software? Would anyone like to answer that question?
Yeah, I can jump in here with that. I think when you're thinking of accommodations, the sort of mindset shift that needs to happen is that you are proactively offering accommodations to people, that it's just part of your onboarding process. It's part of your interview process. When someone walks through the door, I already want to know what I need to do to best support this person, whether they need, noise canceling headphones in the office. a specific kind of keyboard for their technology because of the tactile feel of it, different lighting, access to a sensory neutral area where they are working. But you will find that people know what works best for them. And as long as you are starting that conversation as the employer, you are going to buy so much goodwill with your team members, and you're really going to set yourself up for success when it comes to supporting your staff.
Thank you, Nick. And Audra, I just wonder if kind of in the process of supporting talent through kind of the onboarding and the contracting process, are there ways to kind of better accommodate neurodivergent talent who perhaps their profile is a bit spikier and they might not fit all of the criteria for a role? Do you think that there's wiggle room there?
Yes, I do. And I love what Nick mentioned as far as asking about the accommodations initially. I will say I feel that there's a shift in the industry where our hiring managers and recruiters are a lot more open, right? Because at the end of the day, the question is, can the person do the work? Can the person do the job? So I feel that across the board, we are seeing a lot more openness to resumes, a lot more openness to the interview process. So I really am happy about how the industry is shifting to be more open to support this talent.
Great stuff. Yeah, and that's really nice to hear, actually, to see that, it's on the ground level, people are really quite open to being more flexible. And Kelly, I'm interested to know from your side, when it comes to the onboarding process for people who come to work for Carson's Cookie Dough, what kind of things you've employed to kind of remain, open to potential employees?
So we are a pretty new company, and kind of to bridge the gap between starting out where it's just me to getting to where we have a very robust staff, we've actually been utilizing a lot of the local schools and adult programs. They have students who need job training, so they have been coming out to the kitchen, and it's wonderful because they come out with a job training coach, they come out with therapists, and they're able to help me see what do I need to anticipate, for when we are fully up and running. We have our own bakery, and we're not working out of a community bakery anymore. So it's been wonderful, and it's been such an educational experience for me. I love working with the students. It's my favorite part of the week, every week. It's just amazing to see the different abilities and just to kind of get in my mind, what accommodations have to be made, what should we have already just baseline at the bakery all the time, and then what additional things will we have to bring in potentially. So it's been extremely educational for me, and I've really enjoyed working with the therapists, teachers, the job coaches, and especially with the students. And then and I love, Audra, what you said. I agree. And Nick touches on it as well. The world is becoming more open to neurodivergence. I mean, even I see it at the school level, and that is in the middle of the school. It's amongst all the students. He's in a typical second grade class, then he goes into his other room to do his specialized work. But these students see him and he sees them, and they are getting access to autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy. And now that's a whole school of kids who are going to grow up knowing how to interact with these individuals with differing needs. And I think that is extremely valuable. And I think it's very promising to see, the world's already changing for the better. And then imagine when these kids graduate and they're in the workforce, it's just going to be almost like peanut allergies back in our day. There's no one allergic to peanuts when we were kids. And now every other person's allergic to peanuts. So you always see the peanut label at the grocery store. It's just it's kind of almost a boring issue, So, I like to think that that's what this is going to be. Neurodivergence is just going to be everyone gets what they need. Everyone needs different things. So, but yeah, it's great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe there's a point to be made that perhaps there's more connection between the workplace and these organizations that are doing so much in terms of, the education, the preparation to build those. And we already kind of see that happening with a lot of the larger organizations. I know that there's some kind of, organizations pairing with universities to, provide upskilling courses for neurodivergent people. So I think that kind of work is great, and if we could see more of it, that would be wonderful. And also in terms of resourcing in the workplace as well. And Nick, we've spoken previously about kind of having a role or a resource that is dedicated to, supporting neurodivergent individuals on a more kind of regular basis. Do you think that's the way forward for organizations eventually, is to employ someone to kind of be there as a constant support?
I really, really think that is. And I was actually just talking about this yesterday with someone, that if you have, let's say you have maybe a mid-sized organization, maybe even a little smaller than that, you have maybe somewhere between 250, 2,000 employees, something of that. That is a lot of employers in the United States. What supports do they have in place? How much money in their budget do they have to play with year in and year out? A lot more than you think, hundreds of thousands of dollars that they have in order to provide services kind of under this HR umbrella. I would take some of that money if I was this organization, and I would hire a mental health professional who is on staff at this organization, whose entire job is to support the employees when it comes to accommodations, workplace issues, things of that nature. I mean, you could really, shift around what your typical human resources department looks like in order to accommodate that without, breaking your budget. That isn't a solution that is a good fit for, maybe your smaller organizations. We have around 100 employees, and we have 2 employee support specialists who are on staff with us, whose job it is to support the employees, assist with accommodations, be there for anything they may need. And even with our workplace being 90% neurodiverse, we probably only have about 10% of our organization who heavily utilize our support services. So I think you would see a huge, huge, huge benefit from this as a larger employer. And I don't think it's something that would be a seriously heavy workload on someone. And it's also a solution that, if you're looking to throw money at a problem, isn't going to cost you a whole lot in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and I guess, Audra, when it comes to kind of convincing people of the ROI of this, that they should be putting money into these kinds of initiatives, that also kind of remains a challenge, to get people to sign off on these things. So do you have any thoughts on the ROI of these kinds of initiatives for organizations, how it might impact them?
Yes, I think the biggest thing is just to stay grounded in the data. There's so much data on how our neurodivergent people add value to the organization. And then also, I think it's important for the organization to understand how do they really want to support this community, and how do they want to continue to evolve to be an employer of choice, right? Like Nick mentioned, the workforce is changing. A lot of the younger individuals, they are more vocal, right? So in order to kind of differentiate themselves to be an employer of choice, it's important that they do make those investments.
Absolutely. Yes. No, I agree. And I think it can be a challenge still to say, we really need this training and someone at the top's going, but how is this going to, where's the return on this? I think it can be a challenge. But then, that's going to be a unique challenge of that individual who's trying to do the convincing, to build those relationships with those executives and to get them to buy into whether it is neurodiversity, whether it's, well-being. A lot of these things tend to get cut out when we start looking at, organizations that are budgeting and, cutting down on their cost areas. But if we can say, but actually this is going to improve all of that, then, that's great. And Kelly, there's one question here for you, which is, how can bigger organizations support businesses like Carson Cookie Dough? Do you have any thoughts?
Oh, that's so nice. Well, I've been blown away by the support we've been receiving so far. We've been invited to come in and do pop-up shops, and I think that is a great opportunity because it gets our employees out there. The bigger organizations can come see what we're about, what we do, get some face-to-face time. That's a very nice question. I think just, I'm always happy to have anyone come down and see what we're doing and have a conversation about the different resources that have come my way. I'm still blown away by all of the teachers, the therapists, the job coaches. There's so many resources out there, and I know they would be more than happy. I mean, they're happy to help me, a company that's just starting up. I know, these same resources would be happy to help a larger organization, but probably just don't know the way in, like, who to contact. So I think there's a lot of collaboration that could happen. Ideally for Carson's cookie dough, I would love for it to be a springboard, for these individuals. They'll come, they'll start, they'll get some confidence, they'll build up a skill set, and then take that and go to, hopefully, whatever they want to do in life, to a larger organization and really start a solid career path. So I think there's a lot of larger organizations, and again, and sharing of the resources where, it's easy for these resources. They know who to contact. It's just me. And, they can email me at Carson's Cookie Dough, and they know that where the door is. Maybe for the larger organizations, they don't know where that door is and who to reach out to. So I think collaboration and communication would be useful both ways.
Awesome stuff. Well, panelists, thank you so much for today. We're running out of time very quickly, and I'm sure we could talk about this more. And there is more to get out of this subject as well for organizations in terms of how they can move the dial on their neuroinclusion programs. But I think there's some really key things to come out of today's discussion is kind of, tailoring the approach to kind of fit the individual, not to kind of use it, blanket the problem of not problem, but the challenge of neurodiversity, and to take the time to allow the change to happen, and a number of other great things to come out of this discussion. And I'm hoping that I can summarize this for everyone and send that out in the form of some flashcards for everyone who's attended, because I couldn't possibly summarize everything right now. But that concludes our discussion for neurodiversity in the workplace. A huge thank you to our esteemed panelists, Kelly Castro, Nick Bruno, and Audra Woods, for sharing their valuable knowledge and experiences. We at the UWI, along with our sponsors, US Tech Solutions, believe that neurodiversity is a strength, and fostering inclusivity benefits everybody. So stay connected and learn more. I'm just going to quickly paste in some links into the chat for everybody. So join our mailing list at the UWI to stay updated on future events and resources related to diversity and inclusion. There's the link there for you. And mark your calendars for our next event. So we're excited to share with you our next event, which is a webinar titled Dialing in D&I into Work Culture. So thank you once again for joining us today. We're going to leave it there, but I look forward to seeing you at another UWI event.